Good morning. Good morning, everybody. It is your kind of co-host today, Marissa Friedman. I am coming to you live from sunny San Diego, California. I feel bad for everyone that has snow. Too bad for you. So one of the things that I've noticed over the past kind of 90 days is that there seems to be this sprint towards end of the year and Q1 planning. Special note, it is Friday, December 20th. And if you're just thinking about your Q1 planning right now, I want to lovingly tell you, you might already be behind. So at any rate, what we wanted to do today was to share a couple of really cool things that are happening in the world of 75X strategy. If you don't know, 75X strategy was founded by my friend and partner, Aaron Hagman. And one of the things that's really fascinating about this is everyone talks about 10X and 2X and all of these different multipliers, but I want to bring on the man, the legend, who 75X'd his company and is now helping other people to do the same. So bringing in my friend, Aaron Hagman. How are you?
Hey, Marissa, how are you? Good morning, everybody out in internet land.
In internet land, right? It's internet world. So rumor has it you were just in Idaho. Is that correct?
Yeah, I actually was working on, spent a whole day with the senior leadership team with a client we've been working with for a bit.
And how did that go? What was that experience?
It was phenomenal. It really is. You know, for me, strategic planning should not only be productive, but there's an opportunity of engagement with our senior team. So yeah, we're getting things done, but we're working on team building and communication modules, and we had a lot of fun. You know, business shouldn't be boring, and we had a lot of fun doing it. And yeah, it was a great day. I love doing it with my businesses, with other businesses. Being the outside facilitator in those rooms is exciting to me.
So let's talk really quick about a couple of things that I think are pretty exciting. One is the launch of 75X strategy. So I think, a lot of people mistakenly thought maybe you were retired or just kind of like, he's traveling the world. And I'm like, no, he's not. He's working. I know. I see him every week. Rhythm and Cadences. Special shout out to you for being the only person that can get me on a recurring meeting every week. But talk to me a little bit more about kind of the foundations of 75X strategy and where that came from.
Yeah, well, we'll start with me, right? Me, Aaron Hagman, the personality. If you've known me, if you've met me even once, you kind of just realize energy and the love of entrepreneurialism is who I am, right? And then the learner and the teacher, all of these aspects have turned into 75X strategy. So, really it's this culmination of the love of the impact of what we do. And what I mean by that is that the reason that you and I and our team have put together this program is because I really believe that it helps our communities. It helps our teams from the lens of servant entrepreneurialism to build our companies as a great place to work for our people and to help our people. Mm-hmm. This is something that's just so exciting to me that I just started working with a couple of companies, really getting into it. I've done this work before over the years, and we put together a program and are just working with a handful of great clients to get the ball rolling here. And it's been a ton of fun.
I think one of the things that I've noticed, just kind of being able to kind of be behind the scenes, is looking at where there's themes in the conversations that we're having with clients, right? And the themes seem to kind of be around, I'm going to say kind of being in a hamster wheel, right? People are in this hamster wheel of entrepreneurship and they're kind of feeling like, I feel super stuck. It's the end of the year. Everyone, I kind of equate it to going to the gym, right? Everyone kind of eats a lot during the holidays, and then January 1st comes and, the gyms are full. Everyone's there working out. Everyone's working really hard. But by the time you get to February and March, the gym is back to being kind of empty again. So let's take that example and apply it to kind of entrepreneurship and founders. What are you seeing in terms of kind of maybe things that in your past of being stuck or feeling like, hey, there's something I need to do, or plateauing? What was that experience for you when you were running your organization?
I think the idea and the emotions that we have around feeling stuck, often in the context of how you're framing it, come at the end of the year, right? We even if we're not good about our data and our numbers, we all have the end of the year habit to go, how did we do? How are our results? Even if I didn't do big strategic planning, and that if you aren't managing it through a process along the way, with good rhythms and cadences, can feel very overwhelming, right? You go back, we're critical on ourselves. We say, man, we didn't hit these results. We didn't hit these results. We got this one, but this one, why? I don't know. And it creates this anxiety, this end of the year anxiety, kind of like how we ate too much at Thanksgiving and we're like, man, I need to get back to the gym. I was a little undisciplined. That's the conversation here that we're translating over. And so the planning, doing actual strategic planning, putting together quarterly plans involving the team, and that is the mitigating factor. That's the cure. That's going to the gym, right? But like, I love your analogy. I really do, because like going to the gym, this doesn't work if you do it for a month or 2 months or 3 months. Actually, it needs to be a lifestyle habit change. And for me, to the audience, I'm saying it needs to be a lifestyle habit change within our organizations, right? Strategic planning is a thing. A good friend of mine, Mark Moses. Hey, Mark, if you're listening, shout out to Mark. I steal his quote all the time. He says, when we do it right, business is boring, right? Rhythms and cadences, rhythms and cadences. Yeah, we'll talk. We'll review our goals every month. We will set goals next month. So I'm getting long-winded here, but to your question, that's where I get to stuck in anxiety and like why we need to do.
I want to give a shout out to a couple people that are watching on LinkedIn and Instagram. So we got Dina watching over on Instagram. Hi, Dina. And then we have actually Dave Pickrell from GigSafe is on the stream, and Andrew Franklin and Kimberly Sherrington. So
hey, that's my sister. Hi, Kim.
Oh, it's like, hey, there's all kinds of people watching. So just let me give a shout out to the people that are watching. So kind of the reason that I made you come on here is you have this really great frame around looking at like, how do we create some really intentional kind of, okay, if we're stuck, how do we create some, reflection and goal setting and then put some strategies in place? Because I think the biggest mistake that I'm seeing, especially when we're kind of in these client engagements or VIP days, is the mistake is people believe that because they're aware of a problem, they just go right into awareness and the action. Okay, this is what we're going to do to fix it. And they skip steps along the way, right? Because they're not reflecting on, well, what got them to that position, right? What's the piece where, like where do people need to be reflecting? What type of goal setting works best, and then applying action? Because I think the mistake is just because you know that there's a problem and you go to fix it, well, what are all the steps to fixing it? Because there's a lot in between, right?
Absolutely. Part of this is to go back to the very beginning. It's to identify what I would use the language strategic initiatives are, right? And the point I would get at is that we need to really understand what those are, because you have to be specific to be able to attack them and make an impact. But they also change. So I'm going to get back to, this is a process, right? Our initiatives as we head into Q1 2025 as teams, will be different. Some may continue into Q2 and some may, be new initiatives that we need to go through. So when I think of, and I'm working with people a lot of times and working with entrepreneurs and leadership teams, a lot of times they think, man, I've got to find all the problems. Right. I've got to find everything that's wrong and all of the weak links in my organization. Maybe it's sales and marketing. Maybe it's people and operations, whatever the conversations are. That's often our mentality. But that's not, I feel, the only side of strategic planning. Right. So when we're going into defining the problem, I love to do some of the classic cliche strategic exercises like we just did SWOT, strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats with the client in Idaho. And if you think about that and you look at SWOT, like we're looking and trying to find our strengths. We're trying to find our opportunities. We're acknowledging our weaknesses and threats. And when we go through here, sometimes we're going to see, this year, what's going to support our goals is actually leveraging our strengths. Right? Doubling down on this. That's the strategy. Maybe it's not, we have to fix this problem over here exclusively, if that makes sense. So part of this is getting back to this idea of having a process and then having a system to go through and define what our challenges are, what our strategic initiatives are. Right? Because in one sense, like walking out with that client, for example, they're like, we want to fix these 2 or 3 things, but man, we want to continue being a great place to work, a great organization. And they're like doubling down on some of their culture initiatives and things that are really, I believe, going to be these ingredients to driving the overall organization forward.
That being said, what do you think? And I'm going to put this question up here so visually people can kind of see it as well as we're talking through it. But what do you think the biggest kind of mistakes are that you see when people are reflecting kind of on the past year? I can speak to one thing that I notice is that because, it's a practice I've had for more than 8 years that I've had my company, right? So every Friday I send myself a status report, like what went well, what didn't, what went off track. Because what happens is at the end of the year, I can only remember what's happening in that month. And if I don't reflect backwards, I forget. So one of the things is kind of a holistic view the whole year long, not just the last month of the year, but I'm curious to know your thoughts.
Yeah, most common mistakes. I think one, and I'll just say it as blunt as I often do, is I think we have a tendency to lie to ourselves. I really do, as individuals, as organizations, as teams. And I say it that way because it's unintentional. And what I'm getting at is that, again, I'll give an example, working with a client. I said, what were our numbers in our lunchtime sales with this business? And I got a number. And they're like, well, I think it was terrible. Here's the number. Well, the lie we told ourselves in this particular case was, well, let's go look at the real numbers. It was 2.5 times actually bigger than what we thought. So in here's a case where an entrepreneur is going, man, this is a problem area, and I've got to work on it moving forward. And it's like, well, no, it's not necessarily. It's actually way better than we think. It's our lens as an entrepreneur on this particular product or program or whatever we're looking at. So the lack of specificity is the issue. I say, yeah, we lie to ourselves, but like I believe to my core as an entrepreneur and the Peter Drucker statement of we can only manage what we measure. Right. So we have to have measurements for everything. And I would tell you, like, let's figure out if you want to make it a great place to work, what are our goals? What are our KPIs? So we have to have a real, honest baseline. Is it good? Is it bad? What are we working with? That's one of the first parts.
Yeah. Well, and shout out to, it looks like Jake Thomas just joined us over on Instagram. Hi, Jake. How are you? Nice to see you. We have a bunch of people over there just kind of hanging out. This is fun. Well, that brings me to the next question, because we always joke about to the zeros. Right. So when you have a goal, and I think this is where we get in the trap of lying to ourselves, right? If a company has a goal, right, and they've said, hey, we want to hit 4 million this year or 5 million this year. We want to go from 3 to 5 million. And they get, 4.75. Is that accomplishing the goal?
Well, no. You know the answer when you ask me.
No. But this is where the specificity, I think a lot of people in this space they just kind of round up, right? And it's like, no, you didn't hit the goal. And I think that's where it's the micro kind of, I always think sometimes it's inches, not miles in the beginning. That's where specificity is very helpful, right? And when I first met you, we had this conversation about to the zeros. Everything has to be specific. It has to be numbers. If it's this, it's not that, right? And that's where I realized, like, oh, how many little micro lies do we tell? And then they add up right over time. So the next question, and we had asked some people in one of the masterminds actually for their feedback. And the question we got was, you've built teams and companies. How do you personally recognize when you're spinning your wheels and not gaining traction? So when do you have that self-awareness moment? And what does it take actually to develop that self-awareness? Because I think a lot of people, emotional intelligence and EQ and all of that is part of this equation. So how do you recognize when you're kind of spinning your wheels and just kind of not going anywhere?
So it's kind of like we need hyper self-awareness as entrepreneurs. So I got a 2-part answer. One, it's kind of like recognizing, like, I have like anxiety as part of who I am, right? It's just kind of part of my high strung nature. And so I've learned over the years to go, well, what are my recognizable triggers? Like, what am I doing that maybe I just wouldn't externally recognize unless I go, oh, I'm doing that again. Like an example would be, I don't do this, but like if I were to bite my nails, right? And suddenly I bite my nails again, like, oh, wait, what's going on? So what are our recognizable triggers at work, right? One of my coaches said, Aaron, when you get into this mode, you slip into your safe space. Now, as we've learned, I'm a big numbers nerd, and safe space for me, he literally said, you'll go do spreadsheets. He's like, you'll start analyzing stuff, looking at stuff, and you're practicing busyness, but not quite business, right? You're staying busy as that. And so what are those things? And so with a good coach, I was like, well, look at me doing spreadsheets again. I was like, I don't need to do the planning per se on this. And that's the second part of the answer. You need great advisors. You need a great team, right? Entrepreneurialism is not a one person show. It's just not. It shouldn't be. At least, I mean, I'm not saying it can't be solopreneurs, but if we're talking about building organizations and teams and scales, you need. I just referenced the coach that says, "Hey, Aaron, here's when you're acting goofy." You need an amazing assistant or leadership team members that you have a level of trust, respect, and communication to be able to say, and somebody like you and I, Marissa, like we work very well together. We will call each other out. Like, you're a little off the rails. Hey, you're not following up on that stuff, or you just disappeared yesterday. What's going on? So having people that have that ability and faith that they can say to the boss, if they're your assistant, hey, what's going on? Are you all right? How can we do these things? Or how can we get a little more organized and be more productive? Like, we just have to be able to have that open communication with our team members. And so, yeah.
Well, and one of the things that when we were polling people on LinkedIn and some of our clients in our communities, one of the things that comes up, I think, we're on the business side, but what we recognize is there's this huge emotional and mental toll of feeling super overwhelmed, especially as you start growing an organization and you've had all the same hires that you've had for a long time. And there becomes this tipping point where you're like, oh, we need to hire strangers. Oh, we need to hire a little bit more deliberately because the people that we have right now are not the people that are going to help us 75x. They're not going to help us get there. So when it comes to feeling overwhelmed, I'm curious for you if you experienced that in the transition of growing the business, where you got to this point where you're like, okay, I got to hire strangers, essentially. That's kind of how I jokingly say it. But, so long my own company felt like family. And then we realized like, oh, we need real people that have this experience. So I'm curious. I think that relieves some of the pressure, but it also creates a little bit of more of mental fuckery, because now you've got to tell the people that have been with you for a really long time, hey, like now you're going to be reporting to someone. How does that dynamic kind of shift and change? Curious.
So this is going to be the next half hour for the rest of our live here on this question. So ask a bunch of things on here. So where to start? So when we're growing, so the first thing you asked about was like, when do we need the feeling to bring in somebody from the outside? I used to say all the time in my organizations, heck, I said it this week with somebody, that when you're new, it's like your clean slate, your lack of technical debt, as we would say in a tech team, is like your superpower. Your ignorance is your superpower. Come in, ask questions, challenge the room, because we have a tendency to be like, well, that's the way it's been. This works. We do these things. Like, so, a marketing director coming from another industry, taking those skill sets and coming into our house, right, and working with us in whatever business we're in, that's intense, and that's very, very powerful to me. So there's always a balance, though, right? As an entrepreneur want to build a great place to work, one of our key measurements was what percentage of our population was promoted. So that was important to be able to say, hey, we're a development organization where you can move your career forward, right? But at the same time, we need to often bring in outside people. Now, my answer to get the audience something very specific here is it actually comes down to a mathematical variable of velocity, right? So I'm going to talk with my hands here real quick, but often our organizations are growing at a certain pace, right? And our teams, if the growth pace allows, they can grow together. But when we win as entrepreneurs and our team is doing their very best and they're growing, but our business is going like this, suddenly we are outpaced with what our team and resources can do. So when we're growing, and we talk about in the mastermind that you had mentioned and with our clients all the time, is we want to hire in front of our needs. When my business was going 75x, and I remember there was a hiring cusp, we had just done 300 or 400 million, and we were pushing the B number. We're like, we're going to do $1 billion. We're going to cross $1 billion. There was nobody on the team incumbent in certain places that had built $1 billion organization. So to be able to put team members that on our team that have done the work already, that they can bring counsel, this is what works and didn't work, not just advice and what they think, it's very significant. Now, because that's going to be a long answer, I'm going to give you the rest of this on here too, is okay, great. So I'll share my story. In that exact same scenario, my number two for years, he'd been with me for 15 years. Fantastic, like amazing guy, tons of experience. worked the organization to the day I sold it, still within the organization as it's with Walmart these days. Well, he had never built the billion-dollar company, right? And so when we needed to bring on more executive leadership, there was a COO that we recruited, brought in, and hired. And he had sold 5 companies like this before. And so Dan joined our team, and he came in. And so suddenly, people that are working directly with us, it's scary. It is scary, Marissa. It's your people who are talking to you every day, or they start to work with you on the weekly meetings. I mean, I had team members that literally, I remember one conversation. He comes up to me and goes, "Hey, boss, I haven't seen you in 6 months," and we used to work together 2 or 3 times a week. And it's just true because we had to grow. In this case, our technology division so much that there were layers of leadership. So there's a great book on the subject called Crossing the Chasm. Highly recommend that one. It's
Ooh.
scary to cross that bridge. Not everybody can make it across, but this is a high EQ conversation, right? So we brought in coaches. We had active conversations of how it's scary, right? We talked about fears, what it's like to be, what the fear from my seat was of not having the touch of some of the pieces that I was working with every day, and then their fear as well. So really, like all things, acknowledging it, putting it on the table, and putting a big old spotlight on it and not running away from it is how we really approach this subject as a team in our 75X journey.
Yep.
And it's really important because it's scary. And our team members often, they feel that fear, but they don't want to tell you they're scared. They don't want to be like, "Boss, I'm scared. This is like, what's it going to be?" Right? Because then they don't want to be judged. So you as a boss need to lead that conversation.
1,000%. And I also just want to give a shout out, Rico. Rico's watching over on LinkedIn. Nice to see you, Rico Moreno, partner. Exciting things happening with him. And then we got Devin Denofa from the East Coast chilling, Harvest Coaching. What's up, Devin? I love when people comment. It makes me so happy. It's like, oh, good, we're not talking to air. So other things that came up when we did our surveys, and I'm going to throw this in the chat as well so that we can kind of visually kind of have our eyeballs on this. But why is, for a lot of people, end of year reflection brings up some frustration and regret, right? And I think, for me personally, I've adopted a new philosophy of JOMO, which is just the joy of missing out. Like, I don't have the entrepreneurial FOMO that I had maybe my first 2 or 3 years, where you needed to be at everything and go to every single thing. And, then you went to so many things that you couldn't even, you can't even reconcile where your time is spent. So I'm curious for you, where do you think the frustration or the regret comes from? I think it comes from not taking action personally, knowing that they need to do something and avoiding it. There's a lot of entrepreneurial avoidance. That's a made up terminology, but I'm curious to know your thoughts there.
Yeah. It's that point where we have to be honest with ourselves, right? So the frustration and regret, I feel, comes from often like we set a goal and then we look back and we're not frustrated and regretful if we know we've done our best. I mean, that's like a 4 agreements from the book Tenet, right? And so if we know that, and so when we go back at the end of the year and we go and we look back and realize, oh, we will miss this goal, let's reflect on it and dig in. It's frustrating and we can have regret because we go, well, we just didn't execute, or we didn't actually make a plan and we didn't do it. So we mitigate that when we manage this along the way is where my head goes on. It's kind of a theme today, of course, but that's a big part of it. Now, the other side of this is to not take it personally. And I know it's easier said than done, but that also changes when we as entrepreneurs work more in teams, right? If the team can accept this and say, we didn't get there, what can we do to move forward? We don't put some of these emotions on it as much, not quite as much. So I think that's just a big part of that process of, it's kind of like saying, man, I wanted to lose 20 pounds. Last December, I said, I'm going to lose 30 pounds this year. And then I come back a year later in December and I'm like, well, I've lost 5 pounds. And it's like, well, where's that frustration and regret coming from? It's usually internally focused, it's usually going, well, this isn't what I did. And so now it's, what do we do with it? Right? Now we know, now we've looked back, now we're honest, right? And so now moving forward, set a new goal, but that's the beginning of the process, right? What are the resources? What's the battle plan?
And I think that's the setting a goal. It just anchors back to being specific. And sometimes there's no one to kind of Sherpa or help people realize, like, my favorite thing is I'll get asked to do a VIP day, or you see this too, right? And we walk into the company and there's all these values on a wall, right? There's like trust, integrity, respect, right? Which is all lovely marketing, right? But it's like, how are we measuring trust and integrity and respect, right? Like, hey, I'm going to need you to have more integrity today, right? There's some specific markers that need to go with things like values, core values, how we measure things as an executive team, how we measure our departments and teams, how we reflect on ourselves, right? And so I think you always talk about, for those of you guys that don't know, Aaron wrote a book. It is called From Dropout to Delivery Kingpin. I happen to have one right here. Would like to also give a shout out that I don't know if Aaron knows, but we've actually hit 3 best-selling categories in entrepreneurship, biography.
I did not know that. We hit a third. That's amazing.
Yeah, so we have 3 categories, and people are using this as a blueprint because everything we're sharing with you today is really frameworked out, right? So you talk a lot about working harder, not like how people say, I'm going to work harder, harder, harder. And you're like, no, that's actually not the thing. The thing is to be smarter about the work that you're doing. So let's kind of speak to that. Like, what are some steps that people can do to kind of work smarter as they go into the new year? I think we talked a little bit about getting outside help, which I think is one of the most fascinating things to me, right? If you look at a basketball team, you've got all your coaches that are there and assistant coaches. My thing is meeting, I've met a footwork coach. I don't know if you've met these, and they really, like, their job is to focus on just the footwork of a basketball player.
Yeah.
Which is, if you think of the specificity of the coach for that action, right? Just someone to help with footwork, right? Not shooting, not agility anywhere else, just footwork. That specific thing, I wonder, those are the things that I think move the needle. So I'd love to hear your kind of working smarter philosophies.
Yeah, my answer here is it'll be one of the shorter ones I give. The answer here on how to work smarter, not harder, I believe, is who, not how. It's who, not how. So if you take your basketball player, NFL quarterbacks that work on footwork, right? Like, I do believe that if you're talented and you work hard, like that basketball player in question could improve their footwork. And if they work for a year, they would improve it so far, right? They would get better. I believe that. I mean, I believe in hard work. It's a real thing. However, in your example, when that basketball player goes and says, well, I'm going to go invest into this coach, and this person, I promise, if that same basketball player works with a coach who's a specialist, who knows how all the little ways that are, just we wouldn't teach ourselves, or we wouldn't even know how to teach ourselves. Like, that same year, the measure of improvement is going to be noticeable, right? So it's absolutely who, not how. I found a sweet spot with clients I found recently in 75X that I kind of love working with. It's people trying to get over what I call the 8-figure hump, right? And I work with a handful of clients. And what I've learned, this is totally normal. We did 7, we did 9, we did 8, we did 9, we did 6, we did 9. We can't get over $10 million. Like, I want another zero on the end of it. And the fact is, I mean, there's books to this, like, what got us here won't get us there. And who got us here won't get us there. There are systemic organizational changes of how businesses, I don't care what you do, have to work to become an 8-figure business and stay an 8-figure business into that. And so this becomes who, not how. This is where I come in often as the outside person. I'm a who, right? Where I can go help, like my client in Idaho that's dealing with this right now, and we're trying to move this one forward. And it's the same thing. It's like, well, we've been past this. I've gotten over that. So this is some of the stuff that we know, right? So if you want to move any piece of the conversation forward, be specific on the issue, be specific on the measurable, and then the goal we want to move, and let's go find the experts, right?
And I think too, what's really interesting is I've noticed that you ask 3 really phenomenal key reflection questions for people. And I'm going to put them in the chat so that everyone can kind of see these.
Yeah, I'd like to see them too. What do I ask?
Yeah. See, I pay attention. This is like why I cat herd, right? So one of the things that I hear from him is like, what's worked really well? What drained your energy? And what are you most proud of? And I think each of these speaks to the things that get you out of that cycle of being stuck, right? Because when you look at what's working, and then you're looking at like, what just killed all your joy? What took all your mojo away, right? Was it the people stuff? Was it finance? Was it, was it personalities? Was it, too much travel and you didn't get sleep? And then, things that you're proud of. I think they speak to really a lot of different areas in the business, but they're such simple questions upon first like glance, but they go really deep, right? Let's talk a little bit about that, because I think when we look at the types of questions when you're asking people, hey, like what drained you this year? I don't think people intentionally look at that. I think people are like, here's the numbers, here's the goal, here's where we missed, but they don't think about the energetics of like, how am I doing? Did I gain a bunch of weight? Do I feel stressed out every time I'm on Zoom? Am I living my best life being on Zoom for 8 hours a day? Probably not, right? So I'm curious to know your thoughts of how you came up with these questions and how like they help in terms of reflecting on the year.
Yeah, well, let's go through it. I love this, first of all. Like, and I just had even a takeaway for me listening to you right now, Marissa, which is like, man, I need to do like a personal version of this for myself over the last year. Like, what filled my cup, right? What didn't, and these types of things. So I think this exercise, asking these questions as an exercise, like not just throwing it out there, but like having a process to go through this, which I'm going to talk about, is super, super important. So the way I like to look at these things is, one, this is a group exercise. It's very important, I feel. Like, let's say you have a leadership team of, I don't know, maybe you got 3 or 4 people behind you as an entrepreneur, right? When you put 5 or 6 people in the room, maybe with a facilitator, and you can ask these questions and share your answers. What worked for me this year, that juxtaposition of perspective that we're going to get of, well, this is what worked for my sales director, and this is what drained my marketing director's energy, and my HR director is very proud of these things. Like, hearing this from each other is very helpful to frame where we're at, to understand where each other are at, and to support each other. Now, the way I run this exercise, though, when I ask these questions, and there's other exercises, right? And some of us know like a start, stop, continue exercise. What should I start doing? What should I stop doing? What should I continue doing? It's a version of like the reflection questions we put on here. The way I love to do this is to force somebody, like if I were to do this with you, Marissa, to force you to think about this through 2 different lenses. One is me. What worked for me this year? What drained Aaron's energy this year? Right. And then the other side is to go, and you took the questions off, so I didn't see what the last one was on there on the screen, but that's okay. And what's Aaron most proud of this year? What did I accomplish in terms of pride? Right. But it's the same thing. I would push then that exercise to go, okay, Marissa, that's great. Now tell me about Executive Cat Herder. What worked at Executive Cat Herder this year for your business, right? What are you most proud of? So going through those in the lens of me and then the business. What should I start doing? What should I stop doing? What should we as a team start doing and stop doing? It's a powerful double sort of hit on these exercises. And I said it last night, asking the right questions in this context is the goal.
And shout out to David Mulcahy and Ryan Hall and Walt, I think it's Iglinski, sorry, on Instagram. They're chilling with us. We did get a question, which I'm going to post here, that looks like Jake asked, which was, how do you balance caring and wanting to succeed and not taking it personal when it falls short? That's a great question.
It's a good one.
That is a good one.
It's like, how do we balance that emotional versus logical balance in the work that we do? Jake, I don't want to give you kind of a road answer that we've said a lot, but weirdly, it's goals, right? And goals are okay for me. And it's like, I set a goal, right? And here's the goal of succeeding. And even if I come up a little bit short of that, somewhere in there, that process of knowing I've moved the needle forward toward that goal is okay. Knowing that 80% is okay. So if I set a goal to, I'll just go back to the weight loss analogy, right? Like, I want to lose 35 pounds, and I set that goal. At the end of the year, and if I'm working my system though, right, I've got a goal, I got a plan, I got resources, I've got a way to check in on this and not forget my goal for 12 months. If I set a goal to lose 35 pounds at the end of the year, it was like 32. All right, it's the goal, but like that makes me feel better. Like I can say, man, I got 90% of the way to my goal, or some version of that. So I think it's reflecting that goals are just what they are. Like, these are the things we want to move the needle forward. And then, I think the organizations reflect that. So for me, it's just trying to make it as black and white as possible, because then I can have a little less emotional ambiguity around it.
And I'm going to come in with some more specificity, because in your book, you actually have a section around mindset shift. And so one of the quotes you have is essentially like letting go of perfectionism and embracing progress, right? So I think that
I need a hat. Progress over perfection.
Yeah. It looks like we have from LinkedIn, Tyler Smith. He is an EOS implementer. And he's asking the question over here because he looks like he's one of those integration kind of people. So for every visionary, you need your integrator. I totally agree. I 1,000% agree with that philosophy. And he kind of says, it seems everyone is feeling the end of year pressure a little bit more this year as we're going into the new year. Clarity is key. But how do you reflect on the wins in a more tangible way? And I think that's pretty simple.
This is a great question, actually, because celebrating the wins is a specific subcomponent of what we're talking about, right? So I said something in the last answer of finding a regular opportunity to check in on my weight loss goal. So having that systemic rhythm and cadence, as Marissa likes to tease me about, is really important to seeing our progress. And I will tell everybody right now, celebrate the wins when they happen. Do not wait till the end of the year to be like, we had a great Q1, right? Or if we hit the goal, or we set a goal to have win the best place to work in Orange County award this year. When we get that award, like, boom, it happens. So it's positive recognition. It's like, I don't know if anybody in the audience has kids, but like, you want your kids to clean the room, like, hey, give them a high five every time they do it, right? So we need to celebrate that win, get in that habit of feeling really good on there and celebrating for each other. This is not a solo gig, right? So having that process where we can all come back and we can all do it, we can all high five each other is super, super important. For me, as an integrator, Tyler, to your question, I personally, and I don't know if we have time for this, but I'm happy to follow up with anybody, and you can hit me up after the live here on this. But there's a way to tie in KPIs or goals, if you will, into performance, so that we're not only measuring that, but then we can bring that into compensation. So in a nutshell, what I'm saying is there's a way, and I'm happy to show anybody on this after for the fact, of how we can tie our goal performance directly into a bonus program. Now, when bonus days every quarter, like, it's accountability day as a leader in my head. I'm like, it's double-edged sword time. Like, high five, you hit your goals, or let's sit down and talk about why you didn't get as much of a bonus as you could have. But this is a very positive way. You're giving checks, you're recognizing things. It's just important. Like, small celebrations along the way are better than a big party at the end of the year. I mean, you want that too, but
And I think it's about, like I put in the comment that's in one of our modules, which is like focusing on impact, not just effort, right? I think that's a super important kind of thing to balance out with all that we're doing. I think one of the things that you've mentioned, if I'm going to kind of put everything that you've said in like a sentence, is really just how do we simplify our priorities and just align them both personally and professionally? Because you talked about, that would be great to put into your personal life too. I think that creates a holistic approach, right? Because if your goal is, hey, we're an $8 million company and we want to get to 12 million in a year, right? What's the quality of your life going to be during that time period? How does that impact a relationship, or, being a parent, or all those other things, right? So part of this is creating strategic alignment within the organization, but each individual has their own personal goals too, right?
And have dinner with your wife, right?
Yeah. Like, do you want to see other human beings? And what I think sometimes happens is, in the rush to scale and grow, people abandon, or they don't abandon, they're just so tonal focused that they forget about, like, it's like a speedboat leaving bodies in the wake, right? And I experienced this myself, right? I was on the road for 265 days for 3 years in a row, right? Like, I was on FaceTime for soccer games and, open houses, I was like on a Zoom, right? There was things that I sacrificed. I didn't intentionally think about, what's this going to do to the dynamic and quality of my life and balance or integration or lack thereof, right? So I think simplification helps us figure out how to build with some intention, but also leave some room for, our personal growth too, right? Because we all need that. We all need a little bit of that, at least, I think. Amit has been very interesting in terms of helping kind of structure, like, hey, what does that look like? Right. Katari, shout out to Katari Leadership. He has some really great blogs around reflection as well. But one of the things that I think you do really well is you just kind of take all this chaos and just make it simple. Like you take all the things that are in someone's brain, like what you did in Idaho, and you're able to put it into a plan of action, right? Which I think is pretty cool, Erin. It's a gift. Like not everyone can do that. I can't. I have no patience.
Well, to this conversation, again, two-part answer. One, if the question is how do we simplify our priorities and keep the balance of personal and professional goals, is you have to keep. I think the mistake we can make as entrepreneurs, because our 3% unique personality driven profile will work all day and then kind of go out of balance, right? So we have to keep this as a priority for us. It's not natural. We're not balanced people. Typically, as entrepreneurs, we've got this idea, we want to go chase it, we want to go vision. It's like, yeah, or again, if we go to the weight loss analogy, like you see the gym junkies like going to the gym like all day, every day, and that's all you do, and like suddenly that goal is everything. That's not what we call work-life balance, right? It's just not work-life balance. So you got to have a regular check-in on this, right? We've got to have, and maybe again, all that means to me is like, hey, once a quarter, I'm just going to make sure our quarterly strategy, Dave, maybe we talk about this. How's your balance going? How's your balance going? What are you doing that's working well? What are you doing that's not working well? And I'm going to hear these things, and I'm going to try to adopt this. So one, keep it a priority. But two, somewhere I was disagreeing with the way the question was, you posed it to me, Marissa, in that if I feel like, okay, our job as an entrepreneur and we're going to work hard, we're full-time. What does that mean? I don't know. I used to say plus or minus 50 hours a week, sometimes 40, 50, sometimes 50, 60 on a crazy one, whatever. That's not the point. I kind of believe that should be our workload. And I think it can be our commitment of time workload to run a $3 million organization or a $30 million organization or a $300 million organization. And what I mean by that is if you think of, okay, here's my job, here's where I'm at, the organization is growing, we have to have a battle plan. I mean, heck, there's a formula in my head to where every time we grow and we get more businesses, we need to have a plan to allocate more resources, right? Because if we don't grow our resources with the volume of work that we have, we're going to get out of balance. And it's going to come to us, and suddenly you got to do the sales stuff too, and it's this and that. And it's like, and this is normal. This isn't an 8-figure hump question. People are like, well, man, I've been working really hard and I've got it to this point. I'm like, great, we need to hand this off to somebody now. Mm-hmm. Right. And so there has to be I'll be a nerd here, a formulaic battle plan on how to do this. I did this with my clients. The sales team knows exactly what they need based on what the marketing team gives them. The operation team knows exactly what they need based on what the sales team gives them. And they have a threshold tipping point through the formula here to say, well, this is when I need to add more resources so I don't go crazy, or so that we don't tip into not being able to handle it all. And that applies to us. This fundamentally applies to us.
Well, and I think it leads into kind of the next question that we had gotten, which is like so many people struggle to stay consistent. And so to set yourself up for success, what does that look like? And I'm going to just, elephant in the room, it's hiring people to keep you on track, because this is the biggest complaint I get from every high performing founder that I know. I know what I need to do. I know that I should do, but then they don't. Right. So it's like, oh, I could do it, but they don't do the thing. There's something about, I was reading online and it said something about 65% chance of goal completion if you just say it out loud to another person, right? Hey, I'm going to do this thing. There's an 85% rate of completion when we say the goal out loud, put a date to it, and then have someone that we follow up with, right? Which is why I think fractional advisory is so powerful, because if you're in an organization where you're at the top, no one can really hold you accountable because you're the boss, right? Unless you're willing to hire the outside help to come in and keep you consistent. But that's kind of my take on that, right? Like we need, in the same way an NBA player has a footwork coach or an NFL player has your offensive and defensive coaches and your line coaches and your that's kind of what we do for business, right? Like we are coming in to work with people on very specific things that are going to help them move the needle. And we're going to make sure they do it, because just because someone knows that they should do it doesn't mean that they actually will. Even when sometimes it's in their own detriment, right? Like I see this all the time. We've worked with a couple clients where it's like, you've got to get out of running the thing. right? Your job is to find someone to replace you so that you can focus on the strategic things in the business. But I'm curious to know, like, when we're setting ourselves up or when people are looking at, hey, I need to bring someone in, what are the key triggers or questions that people might be asking themselves? Like, what do you think that looks like?
In the context of like, when do we need to bring the
Yeah,
people
like
in?
when is it? Yeah, because we know that like that's going to be the thing. Like as much as I've resisted the rhythm and cadence of a weekly meeting, it drives the progress and the result, right? And it's consistency and it creates that, okay, yes, we're moving and we're in motion. So I'm curious for you, do you think that is a component of being successful? I think so, right?
I do as well. Like, to the first part of your answer, you're just like, you're saying who, right? Like, when do we bring these people in and when do we bring the advisors in on that? But what the experts often bring to us, what the footwork coach brings to us, is the how. They have a process to this, right? I'm a big football fan. NFL football. I was at the Chargers game last night, and it's like, I know that on Monday morning, like, they've got all the who, they got all the right coaches, they got the players, but there is a process, there's a how behind this. They will meet consistently after every game. They will debrief what went well. They will debrief what went wrong. They will make corrective action steps on the things that went wrong. They'll double down on the things that went well. There's a process. Like, welcome to Third Fridays with me. What's Third Friday? That's goal day each month. Why? Because you got 2 weeks to reconcile the previous month's result. And by the third Friday, there's no excuses why we don't have all the numbers and data we need to review how we did last month, like 2-3 weeks after the period. Like, welcome. Like, you hire Aaron. Like, I'm going to tell you when we're going to meet. I'm going to tell you how we're going to do it. We're going to do this. We're going to do an offsite day. We're going to have this. We'll meet with one-on-ones. You're going to meet with your team with one-on-ones. There's a way to do this. That's my addition to what you've said here, Marissa. Like, there's a way to do it. If I go hire a batting coach to improve my batting average as a baseball player, he's going to be like, okay, I have the coach. Like, I'm going to go follow his regime, his regimen, I should say.
Yeah. Well, and I think, again, it's super important. I think one of the most important things that I've realized is that accountability to another person. One, it gets you out of this kind of, they always kind of say it's lonely at the top, and it can be if you let it, right? Like, you don't have anybody to bounce ideas off of, or you don't have that structure. And two, a lot of entrepreneurs are super ADHD. So having a grounding place where we're meeting and moving things forward is really important. And
well, I had to have it. Let me just jump in right there. I'm crazy. I'm super ADHD. Brooke on my team knows I needed a place to park stuff. Like, great. I talked to the marketing team on Thursdays. Great. Park that action item there. We'll follow up on it, because otherwise I wouldn't have it. And if I didn't have the Thursday marketing meeting with the team, I wouldn't have a place to follow up. I'd lose it. I know me. I would forget. Even with a great assistant or something, we would get busy. We'd forget stuff. We'd lose stuff. We'd maybe hit some of it, but not all of it. So got to have that process to manage the madness.
Well, and shameless plug. One of the things that we put together for this live stream, for those of you that are watching now or in the replay, is we actually put together an end of year reflection worksheet that Erin designed for everybody. So it's got kind of like stuff you can fill out. If you want it, just put end of year in the comments, and then we will get that to you. The other thing, I'm gonna kind of surprise Erin, so to speak. Because he maybe knows, maybe he doesn't know. I don't know. We'll see. So yesterday, Erin sent out a email, kind of for the first time, I'm going to say, to a bunch of people. So it's kind of exciting, and I can send it to anyone that's interested in it. But it's just kind of a reconnection email, and something that we're doing kind of for the end of the year is kind of asking people what are lessons that people have taught them, what are the biggest challenges they have in building the team. If you guys want the email, just comment email and I'll send it over to you. It's got a bunch of great resources in there, and again, we have all kinds of fun things for sharing, because that's just who we are and what we do. We don't knowledge hoard anything. And then, of course, shameless plug for those of you guys that don't know, Erin did write a kick-ass book. Now, did he design the book cover? Absolutely not. But
I wasn't allowed to see the book cover. I saw it when it was done. So.
Here's the book. It's on Amazon. I'm going to put it in the comments for you, but it's really awesome. It's just the 26-year success story of building businesses through people. So it's really, really super fun. I'll put that in the comments too for anyone that's interested in getting to know it, to know a little bit more about the background of the story, because I think the story helps people understand your expertise, and specifically kind of the 75X strategy kind of methodology is really being specific, intentional reflection, having measurable goals, building the right teams of people around you, creating the right rhythm and cadence for success, and also just like having fun in the process, right? Like this is fun. If we change our lens on it, right? Building a company, it's a pain in the ass, but it can be really fun if we let it be, right? And why not do it with a fun team? So I'm going to ask you one last question and then let you go because I'm just like on fire right now. But when it comes to mentors in your life and people that you've brought around you to build and scale, and now as people are starting to think, hey, I need someone, like what are the top things that people should be thinking about before they hire somebody? Because I think this is what's important. A lot of times people don't know the difference between like a fractional CEO versus a business coach versus the life coach versus a executive coach. There's all these different labels. So let's just drill it down really quickly into what we do with fractional advisory for people that aren't familiar with that terminology.
Yeah. So for our side, really to the last part of your question there, what we do at 75X Strategy is an advisory program that's focused on strategy. It's focused on helping entrepreneurs. What I love to help you do is work on your business, not in your business, right? So we're not talking about operations. We're not talking about how to build a better, widget or make a better pasta sauce or whatever we do. That's not the point. The process of working on the business and everything that we do to the system that we can bring to any business is what we do. So we're looking at strategy, we're looking at goals, and then the pieces of the puzzle that come up through the strategic work. Sometimes it's teamwork and people in my leadership team. Sometimes it's marketing, sales, strategic growth initiatives, but there's always a base of strategic planning. It's putting what we've talked about today from a process standpoint in place for businesses to have that initial rhythms and cadence and consistent space in our business to work on strategy, right? If you've worked with me long enough, you've heard me say like there's a growth piece to our business, there's an operations piece to our business, and there's an administrative corporate piece to our business. And behind this, there's all the departments that we have, right? Growth, marketing, sales, business development, new client onboarding, things like that. That's all growth. Well, there's a department over in the corporate team that we often forget, and it's strategy. And you know what I've learned? Like I'm usually the first person hired on the team to be strategy, to help with corporate on here, to work on the business. So that's what we're doing. That's what we're working on. We're figuring out how do we measure everything? You want to make this a great place to work? Let's talk about the KPIs we need to put in place and the process behind that. So that's what we do from a strategic standpoint. But man, there are so many, like you asked a question about coaches, right? And I'm gonna go right back to sports. Like, well, if you're on the basketball team, you got a head coach. And he's doing his thing and he's moving all the pieces around and he's doing his stuff. But let me back up. I used to own a soccer team as one of my businesses. And I know this stuff works across the board because what resources do we give to our players? They had a strength and conditioning coach. They had technical coaches on how to shoot or how to be a better goalie. They had a head coach on this. We worked with mental health coaches. We talk about in here and visualization and getting over the hump and dietary and health and cooks and coaches, right? Like, specialists matter. I don't just go hire an attorney. I go, what exactly is the problem I have and what kind of attorney do I need? That's the thing we need to look at as a coach. Do you need to work on strategy and planning and have a game plan and a battle plan for your business to move it forward? Hi, call Marissa and I, right? But if you want to work on, you need a high EQ coach and a mental and somebody to help you with a kind of growth, emotional challenges, call my friend Amit Katari, who was my EQ coach. Shout out again, second shout out for Katari Leadership today, right? So it's just a specialist. It's being really honest with yourself. What do I need? Okay, I don't have discipline. I'm a little overweight. Like maybe I need a personal trainer. Maybe I need a personal chef. Maybe I need both. Imagine if I put both in place. I had a personal trainer and a personal chef. I'd be like, maybe I should do that. I'd be in better shape in like 30 days.
We just,
but otherwise, we're good. Anyways, I'm rambling, but I think you get hopefully.
No, and you're not rambling. I think it's really important that like, here's the thing. We both have a lot of energy, right? And part of it is because we're super passionate about what we do, right? We really love to help people just get out of their own way. That's 99% of everything. It's like, just get out of your own way and allow help to happen. So we have been on here. Can you believe it? 55 minutes.
Let's see this.
It's like, I'm pretty impressed with us. I'm very proud of us.
I'll be impressed if we end on time because you and I usually talk a lot. So
No, I think coming in early. So definitely a couple comments over here on Instagram and LinkedIn. Everyone's getting a ton of value for this, and they're asking when we're going to do another one. We'll do another one. We'll schedule it. We'll give you guys more time. Maybe we'll even do it on Zoom and make it private.
Imagine if we did this one-on-one for you.
Totally. So at the end of the day, we just appreciate everyone showing up and commenting. Thanks again to, I'm going to go back on our LinkedIn kind of scroll. So if you see me looking, it's because I'm looking at 4 different screens as we're doing this. Again, shout out to Devin, Tyler, Kimberly, David, Andrew, and Rico Moreno. Shout out to Ryan Hall, David Mulcahy, Dina, and it looks like we have a couple of other, and Walt kind of hanging out with us over on IG. Lots of hearts and loves. Thank you for coming to hang out. And if you want more information, you want to get our newsletter, all of our free mails, comment, I want it, and we will make sure to get you on that list. Thank you so much, everyone, for hanging out with us. And that's all we've got to say about that. Peace out.